All right, so we're studying the Tractate of Makkot. We are on page 3b on the bottom of it, oh, here it is. Greg is arriving. Hi, Greg. And
hi, guys.
Hi. And we studying. We are on the end of discussing a couple of items regarding loans. Okay, and the item that we're concentrating on right now is the fact that a loan that's being given, if somebody is lending money, and they did not specify the term of the loan. So obviously, usually when you take a loan from a bank or from an institution, there is a very clear contract that says this is when you need to pay it back. But when you borrow from a friend, you say, "Can you lend me $100?" So if you don't say, "I'll give it to you tomorrow," "I'll give it to you next week," you just say it's without specifying term. So the default term is 30 days. What does it mean? That within the 30 days, the lender cannot demand payback, because this is the default term of a loan. It's 30 days, and therefore, before the end of the term, you cannot demand. This is that's not part of the transaction to press or oppress the borrower to pay before the end of the term. So that is the stated line. This is the stated halacha. That's where we left last time. So now the rabbis are asking, how do we know? We need what's the proof for it? So Amar le Shmuel Rav Matana. So Rav Shmuel was asking Mr. Rav Matana, and he told him a line, very interesting line. Lo teiti v'karacha demefarshet la le'ashmata. Don't sit on your feet before you give me an explanation for it. He was very eager to learn. In those days, just like in nowadays in third world countries, people don't sit on chairs; they sit on their feet, basically. So he told them, "You don't sit down before you're telling me the explanation of the reasoning for it." So so don't sit down until you tell me the reasoning for that. What the rabbis are saying. What is the question? This is the rules that we just mentioned, that someone who is borrowing a sum of money and does not specify the term of the term of the loan, and so what is the default term of the loan is 30 days, and it doesn't matter if that was a loan that was without papers, just it's called Be'al Peh, oral, can you lend me, find someone in shul, can you lend me $100? Here, I need, so he handed it to you and there is no signage of anything. Or even if they did sign, okay, an IOU. Someone say, here, I'll sign an IOU, shtar, it's called a contract, that I owe you money. I owe you $100 that I borrow $100, but in the IOU it doesn't say I borrowed $100 and I'll pay in 20 days or in 2 weeks. You don't specify the term, so the default is 30 days. So how do we know it? So this is what Shmuel is asking. What's the source for it? So Amar Lei. So Matana is answering. This is the source for it. The source for that reasoning is the Chtiv Karva Shnat Hasheva Shnat Hashmita. Okay, there is משמש שנאמר קרבה שנת השבע, אני יודע שהיא שנת השמיטה, אלא מה תלמוד לומר שנת שמיטה, אבל לומר יש שמיטה אחרת. Let me just explain what this is. There is a verse that discusses the whole idea of forgiving a loan during the sabbatical year. We discussed it at length last time, that when the sabbatical year is coming, Shnat Shemitah, right, the year of the Shemitah, which is next year. It's a cycle of 7 years. So on the 7th year, there are several things that are happening. We're not allowed to work the agriculturally, we're not allowed to work the ground, the earth, the fields in the land of Israel, and also any officially by the official law of the Torah, any loan that occurred prior to the sabbatical year is being nullified during the sabbatical year. In the beginning or the end, it's a whole question. Is it when does it being nullified? When is it being forgiven or abrogated? On the first day or on the last day? It's a whole discussion. But anyway, the bottom line is that the sabbatical year is wiping out the debt. So that.
Sorry, where are you up to? I'm sorry.
We are up to Masechet Makkot. You see it here on the screen. You see on the screen. It's Masechet Makkot 3b, and it's on the bottom part.
Oh, it's Makkot.
Makkot.
I was here. Just tell me where you were. Which sugya on the bottom?
On the bottom of 3b. Yeah, it says Amar le Shmuel le Rav Matana. Okay, you can see it also on the screen. If you can see my screen, I'll make it bigger. Okay.
No, it's fine. I got it.
All right, beautiful. So Karva Shnat Sheva Shnat Shmitat. So in that part of the Torah that is telling us the whole idea that during the sabbatical year there is abrogation of the debt. The verse is starting that when the 7th year is nearing, okay, when the 7th year is nearing the year of the sabbatical, so it's telling you two things. It's telling you the sabbatical, the 7th year, and the year of the sabbatical year. Okay, why does it need to say both? So the 7th year is not enough to say, because 7 years to what? What is the counting, right? There are many different cycles of 7 years. Every 7 years can be the 7th year for what? So it's not enough to say the 7th year. But why is it not enough to say the sabbatical year? Okay, so if you're talking about Shnat Sheva, if you're saying the 7th year, you know already that it's Shnat Shemitah, that it's sabbatical. Why do you have to say both things, right? So, Ela Ma Talmud Lomar. So what are we saying? That there is, when it was not enough to say the sabbatical year, you needed to add to it the 7th year. Why? Because if you would say the sabbatical year, you would think that we're talking about a different sabbatical. Different sabbatical that also applies to a loan. So what does that mean? I mean, when is the other opportunity that another sabbatical of a loan occurs? So the rabbis are saying, when is that happening? That is when someone is lending without specifying the term of the loan. That 30 days, the default term of the loan, that is also called sabbatical. Why? Because it's also, we're applying the same rules. What is the rule of a sabbatical year? That you're not allowed to ask for your debt back. You're not allowed to ask for payment for the loan. The same thing. In those 30 days, you're not allowed to ask to get paid for the loan if it wasn't specified. That is what the other sabbatical year. So it wasn't enough to say when the sabbatical year comes, you have to specify it. When the sabbatical year comes, the 7th year, then the laws of completely abrogating the loan applies. Because if you wouldn't have specified that you're talking about the sabbatical year, you would think that that the laws that the Torah is talking about is laws of the default term of a loan, which applies only to 30 days. So the question is really, we're talking about 30 days. How is 30 days applied to a year? We're talking sabbatical year. How is sabbatical year becomes a sabbatical month? Right? What is the story here? So that brings us to another rule that is teaching us what is that really a part of a year. 30 days is considered a year. What does it mean? There is a law. I know I'm not clear. I'm sorry. There is a law that is called orla. What is the law that's called orla? The law that's called orla is that when you plant a tree, the first 3 years you cannot use the fruits. Okay, the first 3 years, 3 years, exactly 3 years, you cannot use the fruits. The fruits are called orla and they need to be burned. And then the 4th year, it's called netar evai. The 4th year you bring it's all trees that are grown in Eretz Israel. The 4th year you bring the fruit to Beit HaMikdash and to Yerushalayim, and you celebrate. The fact that that the new tree is functional. And the 5th year, this is when you start consuming the fruit yourself. Okay, so 3 years, the first 3 years, you're not allowed to eat the fruit of a new tree, because it's called orla. Now, how do you count the 3 years? So the 3 years are not counted from the day that you actually planted 3 years. So if you planted on, February 11th, it's going to be, 2021, 22, 23, 24, and then it doesn't go that way. It goes by calendar year. Okay? So a year is calendar year from Rosh Hashanah till the Erev Rosh Hashanah of next year, of that year, of the next year. That's 1 year. So, but what happens if you plant? You usually don't plant exactly on Rosh Hashanah. You're not allowed to anyway. So how do you count exactly 3 years? So the first year is a partial year always. The last 2 years are always full calendar years. But the first year is a partial year. So how much of the first year is big enough to be called a year, to be counted as a year? A day, 2 days, 50%, 7 months, how many? So the rabbis are teaching us that there is that 1 month is considered enough to be called a year, which means that there is the rabbis calculated that when you plant a new tree, for the first 2 weeks, the tree is not really planted in the ground. It's not rooted in the ground. It's still getting acquainted with its new environment. After 2 weeks, it's really rooted in the ground. So that's the first 2 weeks. And then they say that you add to it that the tree was in the ground for 30 days, that is considered already a year, because we're going by calendar year, and the first year is always a partial year. So you need to have the tree in the ground 44 days. And after 44 days, you can count the first year as a year. So if you planted a tree 3 days before Rosh Hashanah, those 3 days are not counted as a partial year. You have to count 3 days and then 3 full years. But if you planted the tree in the middle of the month of Av, okay, and Tu B'Av basically, you have 2 weeks till the end of Av, which is the tree is getting planted, getting rooted, and then you have a month of Elul. So that teaches us. The rabbis are bringing all kinds of verses to learn it, to study it. It's in Masechet Orla. It's not for now, but the bottom line is that over there we learn that 30 days is considered partial years. So if you're counting calendar years, a partial year is considered 30 days. So let's apply it here. When we're saying the sabbatical year, that there is another sabbatical year that applies to loans, that sabbatical year is what? That sabbatical year is these 30 days of the abrogation of the loan that is not, which is doesn't have a specified term. So the default term of a loan that is not specified is 30 days. And during that 30 days, there is some sort of abrogation, meaning you cannot go and demand payment for the loan. And that's how we learn that halakha that we mentioned in the beginning of today's discussion, that for the first 30 days, you cannot demand payment for the loan. I don't know if it was clear. Please let me know. Ask me questions. If not, I'll explain again. We're good? Good. All right. Okay. We in the beginning earlier in this page, we mentioned a saying from Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav. And for the next couple of pages, next page I guess, we're going to mention several of those, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, and we will learn, several of those, 4 or 5 of them, I don't know. There is, and they're just, the only common denominator is not that they're connected to Masechet Makkot. There is no connection to conspiring witnesses. It's only connected to the Sayer. The Rabbi Yehuda Amarav said it. So it's
this
what?
Tainus, right?
What?
It's the same thing in Tainus where it does this Amar Yehuda Amarav, and then it just repeats all these different.
It's in every tractate you have that. Not necessarily about this person, but in every tractate you have these. You mention something that the rabbi said, so you mention 3 other things that he said, because that was the only way at the time to remember things. They didn't have any other methods of memorizing. So before the Gemara was written, this is how it was repeated. So when it was written the way you're repeating it. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. That's the next section. It has to do with Hilchot Shabbat. Very interesting stuff. So in the olden days, forget about olden days. Today, when you buy a suit, many times the pocket is sewn together. It's not right. The flap is inside and it's sewn. Why do they do it? Why is it delivered sewn? So the flap doesn't get bent during shipment, right? So they sew it. This idea of sewing clothes in order to keep them nice is a very old idea that's mentioned here in the Gemara. So the halacha is that so the custom was to, when you create a new piece of clothing, to make the piece of clothing and then sew the neck hole, because the neck hole many times would have something elaborate, something nice. So you would put the nice stuff inside, and you would sew it so it doesn't get ruined during shipment, or even when you sent it to the cleaners. Okay, you had people cleaning stuff on the banks of a river, and it would come clean, but it would get ruined sometimes from the process. So they would sew the neck hole, so during the process of cleaning, the garment does not get ruined. Okay. Now, what happens if on Friday you got the clothing from the cleaners, and you forgot to open the neck hole, and Shabbos is here? And you need to wear this suit or dress or shirt. They didn't have buttons shirt so much. You just stick your head in, and there is no hole. So the law is, according to Amar Yehuda Amarav, that you're not allowed to open the hole on Shabbos. Okay? Just a little bit of Hilchot Shabbat, crash course on the punishment of Shabbat. So we know that someone who does not keep the Shabbos, that violates any of the rules of Shabbos, that are rules from the Torah. So if they did it knowingly and b'mezid, with purpose, they meant to do it, so it's punishable by death, capital punishment. But if they did it by mistake, someone flipped the switch and turned on the light on Shabbos by mistake, happened to a lot of people. So then there is if it's not knowingly, if it's not on purpose, the person is chayav chatat. He has to bring a sacrifice, a korban. It's called korban chatat. Now, if someone violates the Shabbos with the rule that the rabbis put in place, Shabbos is full of fences. You're not allowed to do certain things, but then the rabbis loaded hundreds of other things that you're not allowed to do. So maybe you're not going to. So God forbid, you're not going to come to do things that are really severe and terrible based on the Torah. So it's called a lot of mitzvot midirabanan, right? So when you do a mitzvah midirabanan, when someone violates someone that the rabbis put in place, they don't have to bring a korban. It's much less severe. All right. So this statement, "Hapoteach bet zavar b'Shabbat chayav chatat," come to tell us that someone who is opening a neck hole in a garment that was sewn for the purpose of cleaning, right, on Shabbos, by mistake, so this is mideoraita, this is they basically violating a biblical law, and the person is chayav chatat. Okay, what's the problem? What is the biblical law that we are talking about here? We're talking about makebe patish. What is makebe patish? Makebe patish is the literal meaning is you hitting with a hammer. Okay? What is hitting with a hammer? It's a saying when you finish something, when you finish, when a craftsman, when a professional maker of pots, they're finishing the pot, they're giving one last hack with a hammer, they strike it one last time with a hammer, and that's what makes the pot. That's the end of it. So basically, the law is that if you make half a job, it's not making. You're not allowed to make something new, to create something new on Shabbos, right? So, but if you so the process of making is not the whole process, because sometimes it takes hours to make something. When is the violation happens? On the last strike, when you finish the actual dish that you made, or the actual thing that you made, that's called makebe patish. You striking it with a hammer. That is the last thing that makes it. That's what creates it. So if you sewing a whole piece of clothing, but you didn't finish it, so it's not a finished thing. So you may not have to. You may not be violating the Shabbos. But when you're opening the neck hole, that's the last thing that you do before you actually wearing it. Before you're wearing the garment, you're opening the neck hole. That's the last thing. That's makebe patish. That is the biblical mitzvah that the person violates when they do it on Shabbos. Okay. So therefore, is not allowed to do. So Rav Kehana is asking a question. Just so you know, there were 4 Rav Kehanas. This is the second one of them. There were 4 Rav Kehanas throughout the Gemara, and we usually know which Rav Kehana it is based on who is he talking to. So when he was talking to Rav Yuda, we know that it's the second Rav Kehana because that was his friend. If he was talking to Rav Asi, we know it's the first Rav Kehana because it was earlier generation. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so Rav Kehana is asking, V'chima ben ze lemigufat chavit. There is another law that another statement, another braita, another Mishnah that says in Masechet Shabbat that when usually in those days they would store wine not in bottles that you got in Bottle King, they would store it in a barrel, okay, and the barrel would have a plug, and usually the plug would be put in very tightly in order to keep the air out and in order to make sure that the wine is getting aging properly. So they would put the plug in, and they would also put around it some sort of cement to make sure that it doesn't pop out. So that's how they would have barrels of all kinds of sizes. But now Shabbos comes, and you want to get into the wine, right? You need to make Kiddush, you need to get the wine. So what would you do? You have to take the plug out. But what happens? There is a thinking saying that right now it's not a barrel, it's not a dish that you can use because it's all enclosed from all sides. If you make a hole in it, if you take the plug out, then it becomes a dish. Then you can use it. So maybe this is makebe patish. It's the same thing. You just finished the dish, right? Because it wasn't usable before, and now it's usable. So So the rabbis are listing a whole bunch of those situations of which kind of barrels you can open and how you can open it. But basically, the regular barrel that has a plug, and the plug is glued in with or put in place with a cement around it, you're allowed to actually take it off on Shabbos and use the wine that's inside. So the question is, how can you open a barrel of wine, and make a hole on the top of it, which is very similar to a neck hole, right? That's allowed, and a neck hole is not allowed. That's the question that Rav Keana is asking Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda is saying that the neck hole you can't open on Shabbos. That's terrible. But we know that a barrel of wine you can open. How come? It's seemingly the same idea, right? So the Gemara is answering. So Rav Yehuda Amarav answers, "Ze chibur v'ze no chibur." He's saying very interesting thing, that when you're talking about a garment, the whole garment is made out of one type of thing, piece of clothing, for material, and when one piece of material is connected to another piece of material, it's a real connection. When you sew something, that's a real connection, because the rest of the clothes the rest of the garment is held with the same stitches, right? So the same type of stitches that you put in the neck, that's called connection. And you're not allowed to open that kind of a connection, because that's what that's what makes the whole the whole garment finishes the garment. But to open a plug, even though it's cemented to the barrel, it's not a real connection, because usually the plug is made out of a different material. It's a different thing. It's not part of the barrel. The barrel is made out of, pieces of wood that are, roundish pieces of wood that are put together, and there is a bottom and there is a top, and then you make a hole and then you put the plug. And the plug is an external thing, is an extra thing. So that's not. It doesn't mean that when you take the plug, you're actually creating a dish. You're just removing something that was there that was not connected. When you're opening a neck hole, you're actually making changes in the material itself of the garment. But when you're taking a plug, you're not changing the body of the barrel. It's just opening a hole that was existing already. And that's the reason why opening a neck hole is not allowed and this is allowed. So that is one saying of Rav Yehuda Amarav. Next, we have a whole long discussion. So we'll start it today. We're not going to finish it today. But we're going to start it today, and it's very interesting, and it's another saying of Rav Yehuda Amarav. And it has to do with a whole different topic. It has to do with the mikveh. So let's have a little bit of a crash course on mikveh. What is a mikveh? A mikveh is typically rainwater or water from a spring, right? Water that were never in a dish. Water that were never collected in something man-made. It has to be a hole in the ground, and in that hole in the ground we have to channel or funnel the water in a way that we never actually holding them, just through some a system of pipes or half pipes that are or canals that are bringing the water from the roof to the ground without holding it even for a second. That's one of the main things when you build a mikveh. Building a mikveh is to be able to funnel the how do you call it, where the rainwater go, the gutters. Okay, to construct the gutters in such a way that the rainwater that goes into the gutters are not becoming possible for mikveh before it gets to the mikveh. It needs to be very, very, very specially done. Anyway, how much water do we need in the mikveh in order for the mikveh to be kosher? We need 40 seah. What is 40 seah? Is 207 gallons approximately, okay? Or 786 liters. So 207 gallons, that is approximately the amount of water that's needed for an average person to immerse themselves totally in their entire body. And that's what's considered a mikveh. Okay, now, once we have the minimum amount of water that's necessary for a mikveh, which is 40 seah, which is 207 gallons, we can add in more water, which is not rainwater, in order to make it bigger mikveh. If you have ever been to a mikveh, you know that the mikveh has way more than 207 gallons, right? It's probably 1,000 gallons or more. I mean, it's a lot more than 200 gallons. And not all that water has to be rainwater. Only the initial 40 seah must be rainwater, and then you can pour in other water. And as you pour in other water, the other water becomes mikveh water. Holy water, not holy, but mikveh water. Okay, so that is the normal way of making a mikveh. Now, what happens if you don't have 40 seah? You have almost 40 seah. You have a little less than 40 seah. If you have a little less than 40 seah of rainwater, if you pour in water that is not rainwater, that is mayim she'uvim, it's called. It's water that is drawn. It's in a bucket, you know. Those waters are actually ruining the mikveh. They're making the mikveh posul. So if you have less than 40 seah and you put in a certain amount of water to make it to 40 seah, to bring it up to 207 gallons, then the mikveh is invalidated. All of the rainwater that's in there are no longer, it's not a good mikveh. You have to empty it out and start over again. How much of that kind of water can ruin the mikveh? So the rabbi says it's very little. It's shalosh lugim, which is essentially 1.1 quarts, 1 liter, a little over a liter. So if you have a mikveh that has 785 liters, and then you put in a liter of rainwater, and then you put in 1 liter of not rainwater, of tap water, then it becomes not ois mikveh, the mikveh is posul, it's not good. That is the basic law. It's called shalosh lugim, okay? It's the rule of the 3 lugim. This basically nowadays, it's the rule of the liter, you know? Okay. So that is one part of it. Now, what liquid is valid to be a mikveh? The liquid that's valid to be a mikveh is only water. In other words, if you are a rich man and you have a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon and you put in 207 gallons, 40 seah of Cabernet Sauvignon, you can. It's not water. It's not It's not a mikveh. So, which liquid can ruin a mikveh? Which liquid do we need? The 3 lugs or this 1 liter? What this liquid needs to be in order to ruin the mikveh? So the rule is that liquid has to be water. Plain water. Meaning, if you have a whole mikveh and missing this 1 liter, and you put a liter of wine, you didn't ruin the mikveh because what you put in was not water. It was wine, or milk, or grape juice, or whatever. So only a liter of plain water can cancel or can make and invalidate a mikveh. All right. Now, what happens if you have a mikveh that's missing this 1 liter, the 3 lugs, right? So the rest of the mikveh is rainwater. Now, that 1 liter that we are going to pour into the mikveh and ruin the mikveh with it is not full liter, is a little less than a liter. It's shalosh lugim minus a kortov, which is it's missing 6 cc, 6 cubic centimeters. Very, very little, a drop. It's missing a drop. If so, you have water which is just a little bit less than this 3 lugim, and then you add a drop of wine into it. So if you would have a liter of wine and you put it fully in the mikveh is okay yet. I mean, you didn't invalidate the mikveh. You just have to add an additional liter of rainwater and the mikveh will be good. So wine does not cancel the mikveh. But if you have water and just a little bit of wine, now what's the point here? The point here is that you put a little bit of wine in water, the whole water becomes looking like wine. You don't need a lot of wine to make the water changing colors, right? So you had a drop of wine falling into this tap water and completing it to the measurement of 3 lugim, of this 1 liter. If you put that into a mikveh, what happens? That is the topic of what we're discussing today. Okay, so Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Shlosha lugim mayim, this 3 lugim, this 1 liter of water, right? That what fell into it is kortov shel yain, that just the 6 cubic centimeters of wine. Umareem kemarei yain, and therefore that little bit, the drop of wine that fell into this liter of water, changed the look of the water to look like wine. So now it looks like a liter of wine, light wine, even though it's really mostly water. And that you take that liter of wine and venaflu la mikveh, and you put it into the mikveh. Lo paslu, it's not invalidating the mikveh. Because what we're saying here is that these water are looking like wine, they're looking like wine, and therefore if someone saw this happening, they would think that you put wine into the water, and we know that if you put wine into the water, into the mikveh, the wine does not invalidate the mikveh. So that liter of water that you put in that looks like wine, also because it doesn't look like water, it looks like wine, when it falls into the mikveh, it does not invalidate the mikveh. That is the basic saying of Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, and that's what the whole discussion is going to go for probably today and probably next time as well. So Matkif la Rav Kahana. So Rav Kahana is asking, what is the difference between this water that looks like wine, that you, if they poured into an almost mikveh, do not invalidate the mikveh? What is the difference between that and dye water? In the olden days, and also nowadays, in order to dye material, clothing, to dye wool, you would you would cook it in water, which is dye water, right? It's water mixed with some sort of a dye. You would cook it, and you put you would boil the water, and then you would put the wool in there, and then the wool would become the color of the dye. Then you'll take the wool out, and what's left is this dye water. Okay. So that dye water falls into the mikveh. What happens? That Nan Rav Yossi Omer, Mei Tzeva poslim et mikveh. If this dye water falls into the mikveh, it makes the mikveh invalid. If the mikveh doesn't have 40, it doesn't have the full amount. It's missing a little bit, and that little bit came in a form of dye water. You put it into the mikveh, it invalidates the mikveh. So, why? We would think that poslim et mikveh b'shlosha lugim. So you need to have enough of it. You need to have a liter of it, shlosha lugim. And if you put a liter of dye water in the mikveh, you invalidate the mikveh. So what is the difference between dye water and this water that also looks like dye water? It's water mainly, but it's you put a little bit of wine in it, and it looks like wine. It's basically looking the same thing. So why is the water plus wine doesn't invalidate the mikveh, and dye water do invalidate the mikveh, as Rabbi Yossi say? That is the question that Rav Kahana poses to Rabbi Yehuda, his friend. So Rava, who is also was part of that clan, or part of that group. So Rava is answering Amar le Rava, Hatam Maya de Tziva Mikri, Achachamra Mizga Mikri. It says, the difference is what you call it. Because we are looking, what are we after? We are after about what people consider it. If people considering it water, and it's invalid water for the mikveh, it invalidates the mikveh, the entire mikveh. So how do you call this dye water? You call it dye water. So it's water. So that's why when you put this kind of water into the mikveh, it invalidates the mikveh. But when you put water that has wine in it, what do people call it? They call it wine, diluted wine. There is a different name. In those days, the wine would be extremely strong. I don't know, 96%. There was a lot of alcohol in there. And they would never drink a wine, regular, straight up, because it could have killed someone. It was very, very strong, very, very high alcohol content. So they always diluted the wine with water. So when you dilute wine with water, what do you call, even though you have more water than wine over there, you call it diluted wine. You don't call it water wine, You call it diluted wine. So there is no, it doesn't have the name of water in it. So if it's not called water, it cannot invalidate a mikveh that has to be out of water, because mikveh cannot be out of any other liquid. You can make a liquid out of milk or out of wine or out of anything else. It has to be water. So if whatever comes into it in a form of filling it up to the right measurement, if it's not water, it's not considered something that can invalidate the mikveh. It's like you're going to throw a stone in it. If you throw a stone made out of rock, right? Or you throw a brick, it doesn't change the water. It doesn't it's not invalidating the water, because it's not water. It's a brick. So if you put wine in there, it's as if you put a brick in there. It doesn't change it. So that's the difference between dye water and wine that looks like diluted wine. So that is the basic answer. But we're going to go into a whole different discussion now. Let me just start it. V'atani Rav Chia horidu et hamikveh. So there is a statement by Rav Chia, about this exact situation. And Rav Chia is saying that if you have this kind of diluted wine, and we call it diluted wine, which is water, which is almost a liter of water, and you put in a little bit of wine in it, that kind of mikveh, that kind of water do invalidate the mikveh. So we seem to have an opposing opinion here, a clear opposing opinion, that Rav Chia is saying that if you put this kind of a liter of water that looks like wine, but it's really mainly water, if you put it in the mikveh, it is invalidating the mikveh. So how come, now Rabbi Chia was from the time of the Mishnah, right? He was the student of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the author of the Mishnah. He was probably 100 years earlier than, maybe 50 years earlier than Rav. Okay? So he was much more of an authority. So it's not likely that Rav is disagreeing with him. So if you're saying that Rav Chia is saying that this kind of a situation where you have a liter of water with a little bit of wine dropped into a mikveh, it invalidates it, how come Rav is saying, no, it's not? So Amar Rava, Rava coming with another answer. It says, Lo kashe, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Rabbanan. Rava is, and this is where we finally get to the bottom of this topic, and we'll stop here, and I'll just tell you briefly. This opinion, this whole discussion about which type of water can invalidate a mikveh, depends on a previous, earlier disagreement amongst the rabbis, a disagreement which is earlier than the Gemara, which is from the time of the Mishnah, And over there you have two sides. You have Mr. Yochanan ben Nuri, and you have all the rest of the rabbis. And over there, and we will learn it next time, there is a clear distinctions with the rules of what is the rationale behind this extra water that comes into a mikveh, if is it invalidated or not. The rationale is whether the look of the water matter, or the content of the water, meaning is the DNA of the water, does it need to be CO2, or is it or if it's look, it needs to look like a water. And the difference would be, what if you have water which is like 99.9% water, but the color of it looks like wine, whether it's invalidating the water or not, and we'll look at it again next time in more detail. But this is the discussion. All right.
Thank you, Joe.
All right.
Thank you. Joe, is there a difference between invalidating the mikveh and fulfilling the volume obligation for the mikveh? Because it may not invalidate it, but the water is not enough.
Very, very, very good. So if you throw into the mikveh a liquid that does not invalidate the mikveh, when you have to consider 40 se'ah, you have to deduct that extra water, the extra liquid that you put in there. So if you put in a liter of milk in the mikveh, it does not invalidate the mikveh, but it does not fill it in either. You have to put in another liter of water, which is rainwater, in order to make the mikveh full. That's what you're asking?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Thank you. That answers the question. Thank you.
All right, guys.
Very good.
Thank you, Dr.
Have a great
All
Shabbos,
right, have a
everyone.
great Shabbos,
Good
everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Shabbos.
Yeah. Any other questions, Mike?
Gerard,
Yeah.
Dove is leaning 3 Sifrei Torah. This
Dov
Shabbat.
is learning 3 Sefer Torah this Shabbos. Correct. Yeah. He's prepared.
That's great.
We have, so come to shul. We have 3 Sforim, right? We have Shkolim, and we have regular Par Shabbos, and we have Rosh Chodesh. Oh.
3 Sifrei Torah. We don't do that often.
Right. We do it on Chanukah, and we do it on Simchas Torah, and we do it in case you have Shkolim or Parashat HaChodesh that falls on Rosh Chodesh. Yeah. Very
Rosh
rare.
Chodesh,
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right.
Good well, everyone.
Thank you. Be
Good
well.
night, good night. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Joe, all good?
Yeah, well, sort of, Both my
What do you mean,
parents
sort
are...
of?
1 second.
What?